This is the Suicide Noted podcast and live stream. This is our 7th live stream, and I've been inviting past guests to join me here to talk more in depth about some of the things we've talked about on the podcast. I am joined by Deece and Ambient. Oops. I think we're no longer live. I don't know, but it's okay. Deece, Naya, hey, it's live. This is what happens. Elizabeth, and we may have a couple of other people joining us, such as technology. We are located I happen to be in Mexico right now. We're located in different parts of North America. I don't think we have anyone who's outside of that. And I don't know where you're listening from, but if you should be listening to this live or sometime after the fact, I appreciate it. And by all means, ask questions in general or to specific people. I want to start this live off with a question that was actually posed by Elizabeth, and I'm going to ask her to sort of respond first. And that is, most of my guests, not all, have been in at some point some kind of hospital, residential treatment. Sometimes it's, I'm forgetting the word now. Sometimes you got to stay there, and sometimes you can go home, but you're getting care and it's rather intensive. The question or the idea we want to talk about is autonomy and agency and choice, and how having that or not having that affects how one progresses, or in this case, how people here, my guests here, have progressed during their stay and after their stay. I know that was a little wordy and clunky, but it'll make more sense as we talk about it. So Elizabeth, in the state of Washington, who I spoke to originally, it had to be at least 2 years now. Share with us as much as you want about your current situation, or as little as you want. And then this idea about autonomy and the potential for treatment and progress.
Okay. So I'm here by choice, but out of necessity. And so what that means is it's voluntary. And that means that technically speaking, I can leave almost like whenever I want. I don't think I can just walk out. But and then of course that affects like how much insurance will reimburse. I'm under the or I was told, because I was thinking about leaving a couple nights ago, that then insurance may not pay for any of it up to this point because it didn't follow the protocol. And of course, for reasons that make good sense regarding safety, there are a lot of rules and regulations. There's a lot of constraints, and it's highly orchestrated and scheduled. It's very precise. And so while on one hand I have autonomy, on the other hand, I have felt like in some ways I've regressed a little bit, just because what's taken away, I mean, you're like a child. So, you're watched all the time. You have to ask to go to the bathroom. You have to wait to get your meds. You don't shower alone. You're checked on every 30 minutes when you're sleeping. Um, there's just so many things that you don't have freedom. And it's made me wonder, like, I did this for a reason, but in so many ways, on top of all of the hard work that you do, you come into something like this, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. And although I've never been in a situation where I was involuntary, this is my first time. I just feel like there's some backsliding that goes on because you're delving into, whatever your index trauma they call it, or what your target, whatever it's SA or SI or SU, whatever these different things are that are the cause, you're constantly in it on top of all of these skills classes. It never stops. And I've started to wonder, is there a place in the world? Has anybody had the experience, whether it was voluntary or involuntary, where your autonomy is taken away and yet you still make progress? Because we talk a lot in the past on these things about when you have chronic SI, let's say, or you've, attempted, and there's something about the very core of knowing that you're an autonomous being, and if you want to end your life, you can. How even some people will choose to have the means in their home or whatever because that gives them comfort. In a sense, it sort of paradoxically makes them then want to live because, I'm I'm an autonomous being, and there's something empowering about that. So I'm really struggling with this sort of paradox in my mind, and I'm just wanting to hear other people's experiences and perspectives because my release isn't until July 8th, so I still have a ways to go.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was a lot. It's a lot to wrestle with, you know?
Mhm,
Like I'm saying we, and I hope that's the pronoun I'm using. People want care. They want to get better if that's what they want.
mhm,
And there's certain types of places where you can try to do that. They claim they can do that. Sometimes, I'm giving this sort of broader thing, but I want to hear specifically from people and their experiences. Sometimes we go by choice, like you. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes and I'm sure there's a huge sort of spectrum, if you will, all kinds of different places that are probably some that remain somewhat Machiavellian or medieval or like horrible, and others the opposite. And I would also add, and then I'll shut up, I'm sure a lot of it does have to do with what you can afford, including insurance. And you brought up something interesting, Elizabeth, in that your autonomy to leave if you feel like it's not the right place, but then you must or perhaps consider that might be $100,000. Oh, okay. Deece, yeah.
I actually wrote down a note on that exact comment. I was listening to you speak, Elizabeth, and it was it. My brain immediately spun into the fact of exactly what Sean is saying. Like, do you truly have autonomy if sometimes it feels like insurance can hold a metaphorical financial money gun at your head, and I'm wondering how free will plays into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we were talking about the word, this idea of autonomy, there's so many ways we could go with it, right? Like that's a great example, right? Obviously, another thread, if you will, is just autonomy. When you get sent somewhere against your will, obviously, that alone, there's no choice. I'll tell you, for me, both times I was in a shorter term, very different than Elizabeth's situation. Shorter term, sort of standard psych unit. It didn't take me long to know it was definitely not the right place. And sometimes I notice that I'm hesitate to say that because I don't want people, or bothers me that people will think like, well, of course you don't think it's the right place. You're not well. It's like, no, I'm not an idiot. So this is just me talking about me. I know what will likely be good for me. I certainly know what's not good for me. I say that then, I say that now. Nothing has ever changed. They weren't the right place. And there's limited. Here's another thread, and I don't want to go too much with all the different ways we can think about autonomy. There were very few places for me to go in the first place. So if my options are like do nothing or go somewhere that might help, and that's it, well, I'm going to go there. I begged to get in the first place. And when my sister visited me, she said, "This is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest." I said, "No shit." If you're young and you don't know that reference, Google it. Good movie, good book. Those were her words. So if you find offense, sorry, that's what she said. And my second experience was a little better, but it was one of the better programs in the entire state of North Carolina. It just makes you think what it's like if you weren't one of the ones that weren't as good. Sorry. So Deece, and then I don't know if Elizabeth has her hand up or she's just scratching her head. Deece.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about exactly what you were saying, and I totally agree. Besides, like talk therapy and psychiatry, these like which can sometimes be very arduous and have incredibly long wait times, especially just to get seen or to work it out with insurance, and even then, it is still quite expensive, even with good insurance. And so, once again, it kind of becomes like how, and then beyond talk therapy, your next best option is sort of like an inpatient or outpatient program.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, the question becomes like, do you really have autonomy if your choices of care are like a band-aid, and that's like talking to your friends and such, uh, or like a splint that you would use for like a broken leg, and it's like, okay, well, that's a bit extreme, and then the next step is full on you're in the hospital.
Right. Right. Elizabeth? You had a mute.
Yeah, so sometimes it starts to become almost like this existential philosophical question of what the heck does even autonomy mean? Because even when we're, out in the out, we have to abide by laws and we have to do these things. But when we're talking more specifically about our health, our own personal mental health, our own personal well-being and things, it just seems to me like in order to be well, maybe it does depend on what a diagnosis is or what your core issues are. But I just, especially since what we talk about is suicide a lot, that's our thing. It's like I always feel like the more autonomy, the better it has seemed to me. And I don't know if you guys agree with that or you disagree or you're somewhere in the middle on it, but I have come to that conclusion that it seems like the more autonomy one has over, life or death ultimately, the better they
Mm-hmm.
will feel.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, so I experienced full blown social isolation, like more than 24 hours because I came down with a cold. And starting last Monday, I was asking for vitamin C and zinc because I knew I was coming down with something. But it's not on, no, I can't get it. They can give me all these drugs, but can't give me vitamin C or zinc. And so at the end of that, I'm like, what is going on in our world? It's like where, you're an autonomous being who is supposed to being encouraged and taught all these ways to take care of yourself to get better so you can be a thriving, well, healthy civilian in this world who can operate and contribute to the world. But yet, like when you know one thing that's good for you, you're not allowed it. For that's my personal experience. I've witnessed other people's experiences. It's like I need to be able to, have room to dance, or I need to have room to color. If I'm going to be here for this long, I need this thing. And it just keeps saying the same thing, like these little bits of having voice and choice over the things that are relatively healthy. I mean, everyone would agree that those are all healthy things. Like, how did the system get so upside down, even when you're choosing voluntarily to do the work and do this thing? How are you
Mm-hmm.
supposed to?
Yeah, I mean, can I add something? I want to add a couple thoughts, and then whoever else would like to share, I welcome that. I think it feels to me like there is a sense of ultimately we know what's best for you. And maybe if you knew really what was best for you, you wouldn't be here. I think that's going on to some degree. I'm sure there's plenty of exceptions. I think that's going on. The other thing that you shared that stood out to me, and I know we're bouncing around here, but I think we're all sort of on point with this idea of autonomy, is you sometimes with both the podcast and perhaps with the live stream, it's a bit of an echo chamber. So I don't know who listens or watches, but there will be a lot of people, I think, who will say, no, 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 Elizabeth, no. Autonomy means if you have full autonomy, that means you might actually choose to take your life and it might work. So no, we can't actually give that to you. Now, I don't feel that way. I would bet No one here does, but and I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth. I absolutely disagree if you do. At all costs, we're going to prevent that. That's the P word. But what happens when we do that? When that's the sort of model, if you will? Well, this is what happens. Ambient?
I can't speak from experience, but a number of
Ambient, you are having some tech issues. I'm sorry. I'll be here.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, your audio is off.
Okay,
You,
give me one second.
Sure, take your time. I had a feeling this question would meander into all directions. Of course it does. And
Is this better?
yeah. So what were you
Okay.
saying? Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't had experience to speak about, but I have often considered voluntarily doing a treatment similar to Elizabeth, and that's one of my biggest concerns is the lack of autonomy. And I've created some healthy coping mechanisms in my current life that would be gone once I were to get into that space. So I feel like there would be some regression there because now
Mm,
the healthy things you have done are no longer available.
yeah.
So you would have to kind of learn everything from ground zero. And the reality is, once you finish the program, then I would say I expect there would be some confusion because, you do have your old life where you had some healthy things. Now you have this new life where it was kind of controlled by other people. How do you mend those two together?
Mm-hmm.
And to speak on the involuntary part, I was responsible for an involuntary hospitalization of my brother. And because it was involuntary, I found out afterwards. So he didn't have the autonomy in the choice of seeking treatment, but then also that he had no autonomy in the facility. So he played the game to get out. And, I think a lot of people do that,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Deece, Deece, I saw your hand. I'm gonna just say one quick thing. That has come up so much in the podcast, and I will reference that sometimes because you see these patterns and you hear this over and over again as I played the game to get out. I needed help. I needed help. Whether it was involuntary or not, I know I needed help. But it wasn't helpful, or all these things are happening. And so what do? I play the game. And then so you do what you gotta do, you say what you gotta say, which let's face it, often equates to I'm pretty good now. I don't have any thoughts like that anymore. Is that true? Well, maybe not. Deece?
I totally forgot what question I was going to ask.
Okay, no problem. Maybe I should stop interjecting because it takes people away from the thing. But write it down if you can. I really want people. I really want pushback. Right, because Elizabeth, I'm going to get to you. Don't you think? And what Elizabeth pointed out, for example, is a little space to dance or to color. There's two particular examples. There's nowhere in the world where you can't accommodate that, probably. That seems like a very reasonable thing. I think most people, whether it's involuntary or not, understand there are some compromises that need to be made. I don't think anybody thinks they should get to do exactly what they want, exactly when they want. I doubt it. Just some really basic things. That's important. Like to color, to move. Sorry, Elizabeth.
I kind of forgot what I was going to say too, but I guess
I'm going to shut up now because this is the pattern. Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done.
I can't have a pen in here. But something about how I never knew until now. Now I know firsthand about the not telling the truth at the end, the beginning of the day and the end of the day, you have to fill out these forms. And, I mentioned that because I came down with the cold, because a week ago they didn't give me vitamin C or zinc because it wasn't approved by my shrink. I was isolated and didn't get to go outside at all. And that started me thinking about not wanting to live. And, but I was like, if I answer that question honestly, then a lot of time is going to be wasted in my being called into the shrink's office and my therapist's office to talk about how all these things, because they're trying to push me to go from here to the partial hospitalization. And that'll just be all this time wasted on how important it is that I do this next thing. And I don't want to do that. So then I'm not honest. And that's another thing that comes in with autonomy is like, you're not even being authentic if you can't be honest, which leads toward your autonomy and your individuality. And anyway, it seems like it's more of a undoing and a vicious cycle in the wrong direction than help. But I'm also appreciative of the help. So I don't know. It's a dual-edged sword.
Right. Yes, Deece.
I remembered what I was going to say, and it kind of goes in line with this topic. Ambient, I'd like to push back against what you were saying a little bit earlier, though, that in certain situations, it can be good to remove the person from the environment that is causing the traumatic experiences that is bringing on these suicidal ideations and these emotions. Granted, some people may have them anyways, even without traumatic events. I have experienced that multiple times myself. But for a lot of people who are experiencing those traumas, they may benefit greatly from being removed from their natural environments and having that autonomy pulled from them because they need times to settle before they can be returned to their autonomy. And a lot of that has to do with like traumatic reactions and traumatic experiences, how those things link together. And so in some situations, I disagree. It is better that they are pulled out of those environments. However, I wish we had something between you see your therapist every Thursday and a psychiatrist on Friday every other month, and full autonomy being taken away from you. So some cases, yes, some cases, no.
I mean, I think some of that, there's no perfect here. I mean, this is hard. You're talking about a lot of people and all kinds of pain for all different reasons, trying to get help in these big buildings, small. I mean, we ain't getting it perfectly right. I think that's an unreasonable goal. But a lot of this, and I'm sure this is done in some places, can we have open conversations with somebody who might be checking themselves in to see what might benefit them? And I'm sure that happens sometimes. And yeah, I agree with you, Deece. There might be a time where it's like, we need this to change. We really think this is best for you. We'll give it a week and whatever that conversation is. And again, I'm sure it happens sometimes. In some institutions or places, the two experiences I had, that is 100% not a conversation that ever happens. It's like, this is the system, fit your ass in there, make it work. Boom, 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 boom. And I think there's probably a percentage of people, probably small, that is actually the right place for them. Maybe. Okay, Elizabeth?
So there has been, because we're in groups all the time, but people saying that how much they're grateful for not having to make choices
Yeah.
on a daily basis. The food is relatively good. We don't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or doing basically anything that you have to worry about. All you have to worry about is just you're herded basically like cattle from anywhere and everywhere and permitted and I think that can be a safety measure for people at a certain point to then sort of boost them up to that next level then where they can be more of an autonomous being and make choices that are authentic for their own health and well-being.
Ambient?
Yeah, I just have a question, and for somebody who's been in like Elizabeth is, this is a space where I expect you're talking about your feelings frequently. Um, do you feel safe in sharing this kind of stuff with the people there? Because what I would maybe like to see as an ideal is when you first go in, they operate that way because everybody's, like we said, a little bit different. As time passes, you say, hey, this is actually making me feel worse because of this. And then they adjust. That would be the ideal circumstance, I think. So I'm just curious if you have or if you do feel the ability to share that kind of stuff in that space.
So yes, for here, if I understood your question correctly, I have spoken because I almost left, and I have spoken with my team, my therapist, psychiatrist, about about how I feel like, because part of the reason I'm here is underlying like chronic pain, and the things that I usually do to help that were literally stripped away from me because they didn't fit within the safety protocols here. And so then I was just like, okay, if I've learned to live with that, but my last straw was, okay, I need, now that I know that this particular kind of therapy, the cognitive processing therapy, is what I want to do. I'm not having the time to do that when I only have this an hour a day, when it's everything else. It's like DBT and CBT and then group processing. And that is so much stuff. Like, not only is it information, but there's so much emotional, stuff that's coming up. You're hearing other people's stories. It's activating stuff inside. It's so much. Like, how can I ever? So I haven't gotten my homework done. And then I go to the session, and she's like, well, if you're not going to do your homework, how are we going to make progress? And so I said, well, look, I need to be able to cut out everything that has to do with mindfulness. I used to teach mindfulness classes. I don't need those. And so right now they're deliberating on that. So hopefully at least an hour to maybe 2 hours a day, I can get out of some of the classes that really aren't benefiting me so that I can focus on the one thing that I'm here for, instead of that being, marginalized. Because they were trying to say, well, you don't have to go outside on the fresh air breaks. You don't have to go on the walk or whatever. And then I'm like, yeah, hello, like now you're triggering all the deprived child, like you have to stay in every recess. Let's focus on the trauma work. And if they don't let me do it, then I will leave.
Yeah, and again, though,
So
if you know that you need to go outside for a period of time, then you should go. I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. I understand they're trying to do it. They have a program, and I'm sure there are people that are doing all the time. I don't need this. I want this. I get it, right? I mean, it's hard. If they let people outside like they do at that place and go outside, I mean, but the point is like, I understand there's a small percentage of people who don't have cognitive functioning. Maybe they're having a break from reality. Like, yeah, that's going to be treated a little differently. You will, yes. The majority of the people that are in any of these types of places, they're grown-ups, even if they're young adults, and I just think it goes back to, you don't know what's best for you. I'm not saying that's how they feel. And right, sometimes you don't know what's best for you, but I mean, going for a walk, I'm pretty sure, dancing, coloring, I'm pretty sure people know that's what they need. I don't know. And if you're hearing this out there in live stream world, you might be wondering, well, they're just doing a lot of complaining. You're just talking about problems, no solutions. Well, we are sort of meandering into the solution world. And by the way, I think it's okay that we talk about problems without always having solutions. It's part of a larger conversation. This is complicated, but I think it's valuable, particularly from people who've been there. It's not just a conversation with doctors. Even though sometimes I call myself a doctor. I'm not. Wait, hang on. We have Naya, and then we'll get back to Elizabeth. Naya? Get on mute.
I was just like kind of gonna piggyback off of um feeling as if it's like I understand it's like a mental health program, but it's almost as if like you're being rewired to like run in a way of like kind of like ants. Like you're just like, oh, you have group therapy right now, and then you have lunch, and then like it's all at the same time. So like I feel like sometimes like you don't really, at least me, I can like speak to myself. Like I really didn't feel that I had like time just like sit in my own emotions. And I understand like, some people that's not achievable to do that, to like their extent of like severity. But then like some people it's also like whenever you're in group therapy and stuff and like, it really does like honestly bring up like a lot of stuff, especially like, hearing other people's and like kind of like what they're going through and stuff is just like I don't know. I feel like I do better one on one. So like having to like, share out my entire story, if I'm like in an impatient state just for like a short time or something, then it's like, well, what are those people gonna do with my information? And it's just like kind of anxiety plays a role in it, I feel like also.
Yeah. I would imagine, Elizabeth, for a facility like you're in, you kind of knew the program before you went in, so they might be thinking, well, you knew what this was. You may not have known, of course, how you're going to feel about it as you go day to day. Did you have that information, or was it all like, what is this? I have no idea. What did I walk myself into? This is not what I need or want.
I really didn't have much of an idea, but I was desperate and looking for something that my insurance would cover. And here's the thing, getting toward those highly coveted solutions is it all comes down to money, really, I feel like, because if I have I feel like I could design, all kinds of great programs. I'm sure we could get together and spend an hour just designing between us, coming up with a great program. But it isn't realistic, especially when you consider the fact that many, it's like a lot of this stuff is inextricably linked to earlier hardships that have, or chronic hardships that have to do with financial problems, and they're all just interrelated. So anyway, a lot of the way that the program is run has to do with and they have to check off the boxes for the insurance, and especially if it's covered by any sort of state health insurance. So there are protocols and boxes, and it's just, I guess the question is how to work within those constraints and still make progress.
We could argue rather pessimistically, but arguably fairly, that those constraints are not that's not designed for this to work well. Like by definition, I believe, like you just can't have insurance companies who basically are running numbers and let that, if that's your main model to figure this out, who goes where and how long they can stay, you can't be at all surprised that by and large you're not helping people very much. So it's interesting when you say that, because I think, right, but are you trying, I don't have the right words here, are you trying to make it fit people into a model that's broken? Other than, or just change it now, but it's unrealistic, of course, to think, oh, let's just not have insurance companies in 2025 in the United States run things. That shit, that's gone. That's not changing. It's not changing. Maybe in 10 years, 20 years, 1,000, I don't know. They run shit. That's not conspiratorial in any way. And that fucking sucks. And shame on you, insurance companies. You're pieces of shit and you're criminals, and I hope you rot in fucking jail. Hey, I'm Sean. Nice to see you again. Hey, happy smiley. Sometimes you got to say how you feel. I'm sure there's really good people that work in that industry, but mostly you're gross. Deece?
Yeah, so actually, I have a little testimonial onto that point. So I was at a point in my life, actually, after my first attempt where I was hospitalized. It was my first hospitalization I had ever experienced. It was incredibly alien, very, very isolating. However, right as I was starting to get comfortable enough to be able to actually like open up to some of the counselors or start to share myself during the groups instead of just shutting down every single day when I woke up and then staying up all night and then doing the exact same thing tomorrow. That was right around the 1 week mark. And that's when I got released. Not because I was ready to be released. In fact, I told the doctor I wasn't ready. But the insurance ran out.
Right.
And insurance said, you got to go home. And I said, but I'm getting help now. And then they said, have a good time at home.
Yep.
And that was incredibly unfulfilling because upon my return to normal life, everyone treated me like a porcelain doll for like a week. And then it was as if nothing had ever happened. Right back to where I was before I went in. Except this time,
I mean, just hearing that, and it's pretty common, very like the people who decide if you should get additional treatment are who exactly? And if that sits well with you, I don't understand you at all. It's astounding. And I mean, any culture, any civilization, any group of human beings, they choose what matters the most. And if it mattered more, you would be able to find professionals and places that could care for people. It wouldn't be perfect. It'd be a lot better. You can do that. It's a choice that groups of humans who live together, and I know it gets complicated when it gets larger and larger into like millions of people. You can do that if you choose. You have the resources. You have the talent, if you will, the ability, the other people who can, it's all there. It's a choice. I wish I were a little smarter and I could articulate that more clearly and give you real world examples. It's true. But we make it really hard, and you're like shocked that people aren't getting better. The suicide rate's going up. No fucking shit. It's astounding. I use that word a lot, I should say. Naya, I just want to make sure I'm getting you. I think your hand's up, but it may have been you've already spoken.
Yeah, I've already spoken.
Okay, cool.
I think Elizabeth had her hand up a few moments ago.
All right, cool. Thanks, Deece. Elizabeth?
I guess I just want to ask the question that's rolling around in my head, and maybe it's this existential philosophical question again. But do we live in a world where people, or where we are supposed to be autonomous, or we're not really supposed to be? We're supposed to fall in line with what society wants and what the doctors want and what the, it's like this on a systemic level. Obviously, it just seems obvious. Like autonomy is trumped by whatever the social norm is or the expectation of the culture.
Yeah.
And then so the SI rate, sorry, I'm trying to, yeah, there's people right outside the door, so I have to be careful what I say, but that will just continue to increase. The rate of that will continue to increase.
So are you saying, Elizabeth, something that I agree with, but I don't know if maybe people on this live don't agree. That's totally fine. I'm a believer that if you give people choice, the suicide rate will go down. And I think it's clear. But I can't prove that. And the problem is if I'm wrong, people die. And so people would be like, Sean, you're out of your mind. That's so irresponsible. But here's the thing. If you give everyone choice, you know what's going to happen? Here's where it gets really sticky. There will be a few people who do it that may not have been able to because you stuck them in a hospital. That might happen. I mean, but it's a question of, do you save a few maybe people or a whole lot more people? And it's awful because what a shitty choice to have to make. And I don't know if that's a real choice. But at the end of the day, you're not going to stop everyone in the world from ending their lives. You're never going to do that. And if people hear that, I promise you, they're like, oh my God, what a piece of shit. Who would say that? I'm like, somebody who gives a shit and isn't about fucking memes. Deece. Please disagree with me, Deece. Shut me up.
Every single day of my life, I pray to God I won't have to encounter the trolley problem. But here we are.
Oh yes, yes.
So close. But
The trolley problem. Yep. What
I
is
think
worth the price?
no, I agree with you. I wrote down my note, and my note was that I want autonomy over my treatment. That doesn't mean I want autonomy to do whatever I want to do. I may need to go to a place where some of my freedoms are restricted, but I want the autonomy to choose to be there, to choose to be able to leave. I want the autonomy to, while I am in there, seek the treatment I think would be helpful, because the thing is, those few who you can't save, those are people who don't want help. I'm a big believer that if you truly want help, you seek help, and you can be helped. But if you don't want to be helped, nothing, and I mean nothing except yourself, will be able to help you. Not even if you get locked into a padded cell with a straitjacket.
I mean, you can prevent people from harming themselves or others. I love how that's thrown in there. You're a criminal. You're going to hurt people. You're going to kill other people if we don't protect them from you and you from yourself. This is the narrative. And that's out there a lot. So, really? I haven't talked to anybody who was going to, maybe one or two people. There's so few people that applies to. But this is what you see in movies and television and books. And in the narrative, right? It's that's instead of words. That's all I'm going to do. Well, take a fucking breath, okay? Breathe with me.
I'm sorry, Sean, but you just remind me of the surprise Pikachu meme so hard.
Okay,
and then it was like minutes after you said you weren't going to do memes.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that really is my ultimate goal. No.
It's a little absurd, but I totally agree with what you're saying.
I think that what I see out there, and when I see out there, Suicide Noted has a Facebook page. By all means, like it if you'd like to. And so when you know how the algorithm works, I'll see a lot of the things that I'm, all these different suicide prevention campaigns, organizations. They do a lot of good, but you can tell by their messaging, by and large, I think they skew younger, but also they skew crisis. And it's like, okay, I don't know how you're defining crisis, but I'm defining it as like, not everything is like this impending immediate, this person's going to kill themselves right now. You got to jump in. You got to go. You got to get help. That is a real thing. But it seems like there's a lot more people that are just not doing well, that are on that path. Maybe they've tried, maybe they haven't, maybe they're planning, maybe they're passive, but they're not necessarily, what are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with Elizabeth after she's done with her treatment and she still feels suicidal? Where's she going to go? Elizabeth's here, by the way, and she can handle hearing that because she's a grown-up. And I'm sure if she was a teenager, she would probably be okay with it too. Elizabeth, please tell me I'm wrong. It's okay.
You're not wrong. Sorry, but I guess I just will say, like, speaking to the trolley problem too, it's like autonomy can still contain constraints. That's different than restraints, right? Like everybody wants constraints. The less constraints there are, the more anxiety people tend to get, because we need to have some boundaries and things to function within. However, I think that, yeah, so I think autonomy actually thrives with, but they're mostly sort of hopefully intrinsically placed constraints. Like I get to the point where I can decide what level and degree of freedoms I function well under and want to live under and thrive under. And when the constraints are placed on society by me, on me by society and other people or culture or whatever, then that doesn't feel like a constraint. That's a restraint. And then the SI goes up incredibly. because yeah.
I can say this. I understand why you can't. So SI, I believe, is referring to suicidal ideation. And should someone say SA, I think it typically refers to a suicidal attempt. And no, anybody could say whenever they want on here. It's unlikely you'll hear unaliving yourself. And there's a reason for that, because it's not a fucking word. Okay. I just felt like I sounded like Bill Maher for a second. And that's not my goal ever. I'd way rather be that meme that Deece mentioned than Bill Maher. Ambient had her hand up. Thanks for being patient, Ambient.
Yeah, this might be totally off track, but I made a bit of an analogy in my mind. I'm curious if these kinds of programs ever encounter a review or input from the actual people that go through them.
Hmm.
And the analogy is I work in health and safety, and everybody knows that safety makes your job go slower and it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it keeps workers from injury. Part of the process that you have to do is involve the workers in developing your safety program. So, because they are like the experts in their work, and also it gives them a voice. Um, so, yeah, you're meeting these guidelines with your safety program, but now you have workers who contributed, and so they have that additional buy-in as well. And I don't know if it varies by country or institution, but I would just be curious, has there been ever a conversation that isn't led by, doctors or insurance companies, where it asks the actual people involved, hey, did this work for you? Or what would you change about this? Yeah, just
Sure. Ambient, I have an idea. We should create a podcast where people talk about shit like this openly and honestly. What do you think?
it sounds like a great idea. Can we do that? Let's do
Yeah.
that.
No, it's a good question. I was in 2 short-term stays, and I certainly didn't. There was something to sign when I was leaving. That's probably insurance shit. Or yes, I was here. They didn't kill me. Whatever, right? Whatever you sign, you always have to sign shit. But nobody ever asked me, formally or informally, as best I can recall, that question. I'm wondering if others have had a different experience, because I know we've had different kinds of. You've all been in different kinds of situations, different kinds of stays: adult, teen, short term, longer term. I wonder. What not, what's interesting, Amy, not even, so yes, there would be data, information you could get, but just being asked the question is valuable. Like, just, we give a shit enough to ask you the question and listen for a few minutes. Just that.
Absolutely.
Just that. Should we Yelp? Can we go and leave reviews on Yelp for these places?
I have to go, but I was gonna say go to Reddit. There's lots of threads about that on Reddit. But
Check
thank
out
you,
Reddit.
everyone, very much.
All right, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Take
Good luck
care.
with things there. I hope it
Bye.
goes well. All right,
Thanks.
feel better.
Bye.
Back to her treatment. What else do we want to talk about before we skedaddle? Appreciate everyone's time.
If we're doing some wrap-up topics, I'd like to widen the scope a little bit beyond just like treatment facilities and the programs received there. And I want to talk about how everyone feels about like autonomy within their own lives, like from family members, from friends and such like that.
That's a big one. Good question.
Any takers, or should I lead us off?
We'll let it sit there for a few moments. I know for me, and yeah, I don't have much of a relationship with my family, and I think people know to leave me the fuck alone. So, but I see the value there for sure. It's a tricky one. Do you want to share Deece, put you on the spot here. Your thoughts on that? Sort of answer your own question.
Yeah. This kind of goes back to when I was first hospitalized, because back then I was in high school and I lived with my parents. Very little autonomy in those days, and everything kind of went through my parents. And so I remember that I had to like fight at home while I was still unwell and advocate for myself to get a therapist. And it didn't even happen until like almost 2 years after I came back from the hospital. So it was this lack of autonomy over my life. Sometimes it felt like suicidal ideation or in suicide was the only choice I could make for myself.
Family dynamics, man. And if no one wants to talk more about this, we can have a conversation for another day with that as the sort of central idea, because I think it's an important question. Does anybody else want to either respond to that or add something else before we I said we won't use unalive, but I was just about to say before we unlive. Different word. Stop the live. Unstream. Become streamless.
Streamant, if you will.
I will. All right.
I
Yes.
guess I was just gonna like kind of piggyback. I think that would be like a great topic because I know every family may be a little bit dysfunctional and therefore some people may like, experience it different versus someone whose family like, completely supports mental health versus if they don't. It's like two completely different, I guess, tree branches. And like I feel like that'll like really have a conversation for that.
I think it's a great topic. And I hope Deece and Naya and whoever else wants to join can join. Scheduling stuff, but we'll do our best.
And if I may jump in just real quick, and
sure, no rush.
I've got a follow-up question about that, Naya. Because you are surrounded in an environment where you can't even begin to have those conversations, do you feel that affects your autonomy to get treatment as well?
I feel like most definitely a lot of my admissions was whenever I was a minor. So therefore, like, it was just like kind of signing over my like, my physical self to like a mental hospital. But as far as like, mentally, it just feels like I was just like doing the program just to get out. And it's like really wasn't helpful until like I got older and then I was like, more of like a sense of like, okay, I just can't keep living like this. And I want to make that change for myself.
Thanks, all. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Wait, what is this? Oh, Deece put in the chat. What is that, Deece? Nobody else is going to see it.
That's the surprise Pikachu meme that I was mentioning earlier.
I shall copy it.
Seen that.
All right. Well, hey, listen.
I promise it's not a zip bomb. I promise.
Thank you. I appreciate you all being here. I hope your weekends are decent. Thank you, anybody who's watching this or hearing this, whenever that is. And just a quick thing, the podcast episodes come out Monday. Obviously, you can listen whenever you want, but that's when they come out, Monday morning. Wherever you listen, they're everywhere, Spotify and Apple. And this is a live stream that's relatively new that currently is on YouTube. It will be elsewhere. We'll see as we sort of get our footing. And you can go to suicidenoted.com to learn more about all the things, including helping out and sponsoring and whatever it is. It's all there, or most of it. I built the website. Don't judge. It's mediocre. It'll get better in time, but the information is there. And finally, if you're a suicide attempt survivor or a chronic ideator and you want to talk, you can do that here, but you could also do it for the podcast. So just reach out. The email, quite simply, is hello@suicidenoted.com. Thanks, y'all. I'm going to stop the live. I hope you have a decent day. Thanks, everyone, for joining me here.
Here, wait, Sean. Real quick, 1 second. Ambient would like to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh no, nothing for live.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Apologies.
No worries. Some things are for lives and some things aren't. And now we aren't. Ciao for now.